term enterprising leader is closely connected with the word entrepreneur. In some instances, you'll find in dictionaries that they are even considered synonyms. Therefore, when I found a Forbes article entitled 5 Essential Qualities for Entrepreneurial Leadership, it caught my attention. Now, if you're interested, the 5 qualities the author, Todd Warren, cited were vision and dissatisfaction with the present, knowing and taking advantage of your unfair advantages, the ability to get people on board and add to the vision, flexibility to adapt, openness to feedback, and the ability to learn, and then persistence and execution. I also found it interesting that he actually had 10 qualities that he called 5. But as you look at these qualities, they're very similar to qualities that are found in Nehemiah chapter 11, if you'll be turning there. By this point in the book of Nehemiah, Nehemiah had successfully led the effort to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem, to restore the law's place in society, and to revive the keeping of the major Jewish festivals. And as part of that then, to renew the commitment of the people to the covenant as a whole. But there was something still lacking. To make these things a permanent part of new Jewish society, Nehemiah needed to convince leaders to stay in Jerusalem and rebuild society. In previous years, that would have been clear. You want to be in Jerusalem, it's the place to be. But remember, it was also the place that suffered horrendous destruction. It was a lot of work to go back there. It was a tough place to be. It was easier to go into the fields and farm there and take care of that. But he did actually accomplish this. And he didn't do it by creating a law, just kind of by fiat saying, you're going to go and stay here. But rather, he accomplished this by creating a new generation of what we'll call enterprising leaders. And as we look then at these, the first I want you to note are the qualities we're going to read about in Nehemiah chapter 11 and beginning now in verse 1, is that enterprising leaders lead by active participation. It reads, "Now the leaders of the people dwelt at Jerusalem. The rest of the people cast lots to bring 1 out of 10 to dwell in Jerusalem, the holy city, and 9/10 were to dwell in other cities." They were deciding, and they just opened it up and essentially cast a lot to see who would stay there and be a part in rebuilding that city. In 1 Corinthians 15, verse 58, it says, "Therefore, my beloved brethren, be ye steadfast, unmovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord, inasmuch as you know that your labor is not in vain in the Lord." The whole nature here of the willingness to be part, they all had to put their names up. They all had to be willing to do it then. And then 1/10 had that commitment then already made. If you think about it, all of them had the commitment. But they were going to then take it up and say, we're going to do this. Now, in principle, as you look through that one verse, though, you think about what we mean by active participation. Because we think about, well, I'm participating, I'm here, I'm part of this. But there are specific things that if you're going to be an enterprising leader, you have to do in the nature of your activity. And the first thing, you have to do whatever you expect others to do. That is a bottom line, a baseline. In 1 Corinthians 11, verse 1, the Apostle Paul was able to state it this way: "Be ye followers of me, even as I also am of Christ." I am not asking anything of you that I am not already ready to do and I'm doing myself. That really is where we are and should begin when we think about active participation. Now, no one person can do everything, but the willingness and the preparedness ought to be there in order to, if it's necessary, to carry things out and to do whatever you expect others to do. When you think about it in a number of places, you don't want to be the person who is going to go and say, you go and do all this that I don't want to do. That doesn't bring people in very much. Now, part of it you're going to say, let me show you how to do this. I did this when I began here. You may not be needing to do that right now. That may not be the best thing, but the willingness and to show that, yes, I do this is very important for people to understand what it is that you're participating. You also have to be able to understand and appreciate the challenges people face and do so by experience. The willingness to be there. They didn't just look out and say, oh, you people over here, y'all go rebuild Jerusalem. We're going to be out here making money. They had to go back themselves. Now think about it in this way from Hebrews chapter 4, verse 15. For we do not have a high priest who cannot sympathize with our weaknesses, but was in all points tempted as we, yet without sin. What was he doing? He put himself in this situation that we find ourselves. That is truly leadership on the part of Christ, that it was not just he knew. Could God know just by the right of being God? Sure, he made man. But it was the experiencing of it that showed how far he was willing to go. And that's really what leadership requires too, in active participation. And that means you place yourself at the heart of the challenge, not just on the fringe. You don't want to be safely removed from all the problems and danger and any controversy, but rather to accept that you're going to be at the heart of it. One of the problems in Europe in World War II was some of the generals being too far removed from the front lines that they didn't know what was going on in the front lines. And that was true in both armies. They didn't know what was going on, and they didn't know the conditions, and therefore they did not know by experience to understand why the requests were being made like they were. In Acts chapter 19, verse 30, we find an instance where there's a big riot starting because of Demetrius the silversmith. And it says when Paul wanted to go to the people, the disciples would not allow him. You have Paul rushing into the heart of a riot to try to do something about it, and the people who have been led by him stopping him. That is truly showing the nature of active participation as a leader in really wanting to get things done. Because people want a leader alongside them, not lording it over them. It doesn't matter whether you're talking about in business, in the military, or in the church. You want someone who you can identify with and you think identifies with you. That's what you want. And so in 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 3, there Peter, remember, an apostle and an elder, as he states this, says not lording it over the flock, but being an example to the believers. Now, he wasn't limiting that to saying the only thing they do is be an example, but he was saying there's a specific way in which you do not behave. What is it about? You participate with them. You don't stand aloof above them. And so you need to be part of their lives, part of the work, and always be part of whatever you're asking people to do actively. Second thing is invest yourself. Enterprising leaders lead by investing some of themselves. Notice verse 2. And the people blessed all the people who willingly offered themselves to dwell at Jerusalem. The key part here was their willingness to invest of themselves in this overall work that was there for everyone, but they were going to be a part of it themselves. In 2 Corinthians chapter 8 and verse 5, it says, and not only as we hope, but they first gave themselves to the Lord and then to us by the will of God. The nature of the giving, and that was talking about the Philippians, was that they gave self first. They didn't just make it a side contribution or only financial. Their heart was in it. And so what is important for leadership is to make sure your heart is fully into it, or there's no way you can effectively lead it. If you're not fully committed yourself into it, then it just becomes something over here. So therefore, in the church, anything we do requires full commitment, top to bottom, and the more we have of that full commitment, the greater success. Because people know when the people aren't really, oh yeah, we're doing this, we're going to want to. They know the difference between that and this is what we are about as a people. Be there with us. Do it with us. Be part of it. You know, think about it. If a stockbroker refuses to invest in a particular company, why would you accept his recommendation that you should invest? That's a pretty hard sell, if you don't mind the expression. You're not going to do that. And the same thing is true in leadership across the board. They need to see that you're willing to invest yourself. The people who follow you should identify you with the cause that you're promoting and the cause with you. In Exodus 32, verse 26, Moses has come down from the mountain. He has heard the people, and they're carrying on. This is when they have had this molten calf that Aaron has made for them. And then when he gets down, he sees what's happened. He's broken the tablets. And he stands at the entrance of the camp and he says, whoever's on the Lord's side, come to me. What was he calling on them to do? We find the sons of Levi answered the call. Identify with my cause in this. We're going to take care of this right here and now. Be someone that people identify with the cause. Because when they say you're all in, you're part of this, this is what matters to you, that makes a difference when you go and asking something of them. That you're not asking them to give something, you're asking them to participate in something which you've already given everything. Sacrifice then personal ease to demonstrate how much the cause mattered. Later on in Numbers chapter 14, verses 12 through 19, we find that the apostle, or that Moses there, he is leading the charge, and the people have they've totally revolted. They're not willing to go in, and God's saying, I'm ready to destroy them. We'll start over with you. Moses says, no, don't do that. No, remember, this is actually fairly early on. They've already been a headache to him. They've already caused him all sorts of trouble. These are not easy people for an easy job that Moses has. He's going to have years now left of leading this group of people. But because he identifies with that cause, he's not going to take the easy way out. He's going to fight through it because he's got his sights set on something greater, on what God's cause is. And that causes him to say, I'm going to stick with this even though it's harder, because I'm going to do what's right by God and for this people. And that means sometimes you have to volunteer with the rest of the people if you expect them to volunteer. Show up when you expect them to show up. And that part of it is important in saying, I'm there with you. I believe in this. I'm invested in this. When David came down and saw the armies arrayed, Goliath coming out every day, taunting them, his reply when he finally got around to Saul was, let no man's heart fail because of him. Your servant will go and fight this Philistine. From an early age, he's there saying, I want to go into battle. And then when you find later on in his life, when he's older as a king, he's still ready to go into battle, and they're having to pull him back from going into battle. He's there. He's willing to be part of it and invest himself. Thirdly, enterprising leaders lead by paying attention to details. And for this, I want you to notice something. We're going to read a number of verses from the text, and you're going to see a theme develop in one word, and then we're going to be looking at all the ways in which this is used. First of all, then, verse 9. Joel the son of Zichri was their overseer, and Judah the son of Zanuah was second over the city. Verse 14. And their brethren, mighty men of valor, were 128. Their overseer was Zabdiel, the son of one of the great men. Verse 16. Shabbathai and Jozabad, of the heads of the Levites, had the oversight of the business outside of the house of God. Now verses 22 and 23. Also the overseer of the Levites at Jerusalem was Uzzi, the son of Bani, the son of Hashabiah, the son of Mattaniah, the son of Micah, of the sons of Asaph, the singers in charge of the service of the house of God. Now, if you notice, each time through those verses, some form of overseer oversight was used as being a level of responsibility. And also, if you go and look at what they were doing, it specified some specific area that they needed to pay attention to. And there's a lot to that, and the details of different aspects that you're going to be ready to pay attention to. You have to pay attention to what's going on in the lives of people. If you're going to anticipate their problems and their needs, you're going to have to know somehow. That doesn't mean that you set up spies around town. Not going to do that. But to be enough aware of individuals so that you can detect when there's a problem and follow up on it. Acts chapter 20, verse 28, take heed unto the flock, it says, over which the Holy Spirit hath made you overseers, to feed or shepherd the church of God, who he hath purchased with his own blood. The terminology there when he says that you're to shepherd is important because it's that idea of paying attention to what's going on. What's going on with the sheep? What's going on in individual lives and problems so that there's an awareness there. And that requires paying attention to some details. The small things tell you, people don't tell you the big things usually. In your company, you notice someone's, this is a good employee and their work's kind of fallen off a little bit. There's something going on usually there. You figure out what that is, you fix your problem, if you can help them through it. And the same thing is a lot true is that there are little small kind of things that we go through is we don't want to let on that we're dealing with something really major. But yet a lot of times there are signs if we're paying attention to them. So pay attention to what's going on in the lives of people around you. Pay attention to the potential for conflict between people or a conflict over doctrine, both to be prepared to avoid it and to defeat it. You have to be ready for both. And guess what? A lot of times what happens is kind of like in war. We're always ready to fight the last campaign. We know exactly how to win that one. And the next one is rarely the same. A lot of times we've got ourselves in the church all prepared for yesterday's problems, and we haven't prepared ourselves for tomorrow's. We need to be anticipating these things, and that means paying attention to the details of what things are going on around you in the world, what little things are going on and being said behind the scenes. Think about just Paul's message in Philippians chapter 4, 2 through 4, or 2 and 3, about Euodias and Syntyche. There's a little problem brewing here. Euodias, Syntyche, y'all need to work things out. He was seeing that there's going to be a bigger problem if we don't handle it. Well, it's a little problem. Why? It was small. He was paying attention to the details. We also find in 1 Timothy chapter 1, 18 through 20, he is noting in that instance two people, Hymenaeus and Alexander, who are departing and made a shipwreck of the faith, he says. And that's a serious enough charge. He says, you need to make sure that they can't cause any more problems. Don't let them get involved. Don't let them work on people anymore. Deal with it. And so you have to pay attention to those small things that we've got a problem here, and we've got to deal with it. Several years ago, in a doctor's office where we attended, they found out later that their accountant had been embezzling money. They had just left him on all alone, and he just did whatever because there was no paying attention to the details. As a result, they ended up with this huge problem where if they paid attention to small little things early on, they could have prevented what ended up being a huge loss. While that is true financially, it's even truer spiritually. Pay attention to how external matters affect people. In Revelation 2, verse 9, Jesus said this, I know your works, tribulation, and poverty, but you are rich. And I know the blasphemy of those who say they are Jews and are not, but are the synagogue of Satan. Now, he is talking to the church of Smyrna, the people, and he is telling them, I know what you're doing. I know what you're going through. I know your situation. I'm aware of it, and that enters into how I see you, care about you, and are preparing for you. That's Jesus showing us how to pay attention to those kind of details of what they were about. And you look through all those letters in chapters 2 and 3, you see details of specific things that are going on. But we also have to pay attention to mission and purpose. In Luke 19, verse 10, Jesus said, the Son of Man has come to seek and save that which was lost. It's amazing how simple it is for, with everything else we get going on, we can actually allow ourselves not to pay attention to the things that we're supposed to be paying attention to the most. I hope we understand we're supposed to be paying attention to spiritual things. And yet whenever some big thing comes up that's physical, it receives all the attention. And so we end up losing sense of mission and purpose because we've got these distractions. That kind of thing is a detail too, of paying attention to how we are responding to issues and being prepared to deal with them the proper way. Enterprising leaders lead also by guiding the work. Now, guide, I'm using it in a very specific way here, and we're now going to look at verses 11 and 12 in our text. Sariah, the son of Achiah, the son of Meshullam, the son of Zadok, the son of Meraioth, the son of Ahitub, was the leader of the house of God. Their brethren who did the work of the house were 822. And Adiah, the son of Jeroham, the son of Palaliah, the son of Amzi, the son of Zechariah, the son of Pashur, the son of Micaiah. Now, the nature of what the word is here for leader is important because it's talking about a guide. And in guiding, that's important because it means you're not the one who has to do all the work. A leader is not someone who has to do all the work. You don't have leaders in the church so they can do all the work of the church. You have leaders to guide everything in the church that's going on, to help provide direction, to help give motivation, to correct, to address things when they need to, as well as to participate, as we've already seen. So what do you guide? You have to guide the focus of the work. Now we see from Matthew 28, verses 18 through 20, two aspects of this. Jesus says after his resurrection, all power hath been given unto me in heaven and in earth. Go ye therefore and teach all nations, baptizing them into the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all things whatsoever I've commanded you. And lo, I am with you always, even to the end of the world. Now, he addressed there the need to guide then on reaching the lost and keeping the saved, building up and strengthening the saved. In Galatians chapter 6, verse 10, we see another aspect of the work. That is, as you therefore have opportunity, let us do good unto all men, especially those of the household of faith. These are very broad when you think about it. Of all that it takes to reach someone who is lost, that is actually a lot of different things that can be involved in that process. All the things it takes to help someone learn and grow to be saved, there are a lot of things that are involved in that process. And all the things that it takes to do good, that's very generic. Do good to all men. There's a lot that's covered there. It requires focus. There's a how that may depend upon the time, that may depend upon the place, that may depend upon a lot of other things. So that's where there has to be a guide in that focus of here's how we're going to accomplish these goals, a guide to the work. And part of that, though, is providing training for people in the work. In Ephesians chapter 4, verses 11 through 16, a list is given. He begins, though, just simply with verse 11, which he says that he gave some to be apostles and some prophets and some evangelists and some pastors and teachers. And he then talks about the why of it, and all of it is to the benefit of the body, is summing up. But notice what that implies. It implies then that if these roles are to exist, and not all of them still do, but many do, if any role is to exist and accomplish its purpose, then people must be prepared so they can perform those roles. That requires training. It is not, congratulations, you're a Bible class teacher, here's your guide. Training. It is not, you think about it, we spend 2 years training preachers. Do elders and deacons get any benefit of the training? Not often. Some have. How much do we train people to be a Bible class teacher? Now, there are other ways to do it. The point is you do not know automatically. That requires guidance and training. To do any kind of task, to knock on a door and know the right way to talk to people, to conduct a Bible study. No one expects you to know automatically how to conduct a Bible study, but you do have a responsibility to learn. And so look for guidance, and that's part of this. It also means offering help along the way for success in the work. In 1 Timothy chapter 1, 3, and 4, Paul has given instructions to Timothy. He's given him responsibility. Here's what you were to do in Ephesus when I leave. But he's also given him encouragement that he can do it. You can get this done. And he'll remind him, here's what I expect you to do. Here's what I want you to do. But implied in that is you can do this. Guiding the work, even from afar. But you see, you also have to hold people accountable. If there's actually going to be guidance that here's the mark. Here's what I need you to hit. We need to hold people accountable in the work. And that's part of the guidance of it. In 2 Corinthians chapter 8, verses 10 through 12, we looked at verse 5 earlier. There, the Apostle Paul is reminding the Corinthians that they promised to give, and now he's saying, you know what? You need to do what you promised. What is he doing? He's holding them accountable. So he had provided guidance in 1 Corinthians chapter 16, 1 and 2. They were all on board with it and talked to him about it. But here he's coming back. Seems like maybe there's something slow. He's now holding them accountable to it. He's guiding them again. And he's simply saying, you said you'd do this. We expect that you're going to do this. It was not overboard. It was not overbearing. It was not in any way mean, but it was still accountability. And that's an important part of guiding the work. Fifthly, enterprising leaders lead by taking the initiative. Verse 17, I want you to notice something here. Mattaniah, the son of Micah, the son of Zabdi, the son of Asaph, the leader who began the thanksgiving with prayer. Bakbukiah, the second among his brethren, and Abda, the son of Shammah, the son of Galai, the son of Jeduthun. Did you notice that? He made a decision that mattered enough to be put into Scripture. He took the initiative in this case to say we need to begin with prayer. In Joshua chapter 1 and verse 9, toward the end of where the Lord is speaking to Joshua, he says, Have I not commanded you? Be strong and of good courage. Do not be afraid nor be dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. Now, notice what he's saying. This is the Lord talking here. And he's saying, haven't I already told you what to do? He'd already told him to be strong and of good courage and do this. Haven't I told you? You now know all you need to know. What's left? Having the will to do it. The initiative to make it happen. And that's part of what leadership is. Leadership is the making it happen part of the Bible. God tells us, here's what we are to do. Leadership is, here's how we're going to make it happen. So take the initiative, and thinking just some of the examples from this, take the initiative to begin everything you do with prayer. Philippians 4 verse 6, be anxious for nothing, but in everything through prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known unto God. Does prayer come to mind as saying, this is something we ought to start by praying about it? It's important. If it's important enough to talk about, isn't it important enough to pray about? That's not just true in the church, that's true in your life. If we're going to spend our time talking about it, then we ought to think about praying about it. Take the initiative to speak up when there's a problem. In Exodus chapter 18, verses 17 through 23, Moses has just been going around and listening and being a judge from the beginning of the day of dawn breaking till late into the day would almost be the next day for them. So sunset. And people are coming to him with their problems. His father-in-law, Jethro, comes to him and says, this isn't right. You need to divide up this work. And as a result of his speaking up to Moses, he was protecting Moses' interest. But it took initiative to be willing to speak to Moses and say, there's a better way to do this than what you're doing. You can divide this all up, and you need to reserve yourself for the hard problems, not all the little, petty problems. Other people can handle that. But you have to take the initiative to, when you see something, to act, to say we can solve this. How many times do we just sit around and we see a problem, and then we think about it, it concerns us, and then we forget about it? That's a lack of initiative. And we need to have some more initiative in dealing with it. Take the initiative then to address a problem proactively. In Galatians chapter 2, verse 11, Paul gives us an example of this when it says, now when Peter had come to Antioch, I withstood him to the face because he was to be blamed. There's a problem. You've got an apostle there. He's part of the problem. But Paul, another apostle, says, we got an issue here that needs to be addressed. I'm speaking up. And so he takes the initiative to say, this matters enough that it has to be dealt with. We also need to take initiative to seize opportunities instead of waiting on events to kind of determine decisions. In Judges 7, verses 20 through 25, Gideon has an opportunity that's created by God, because of their going up against the Midians with the 300. But after they've scattered them, the question is, what do you do now? And Gideon sees it as, this is opportunity. Let's go get them. How many times does God give us opportunities and we say, well, we already had a good fight once and we ought to be satisfied with that? Enterprising leaders lead by taking the initiative. Number 6, verse 24. Enterprising leaders lead by connecting with the people. Pethahiah, the son of Meshabel of the children of Zerah, the son of Judah, was the king's deputy in all matters concerning the people. In 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verses 11 through 13, it says, Apostle Paul writing here, therefore comfort one another and edify one another, just as you are also doing. Then he says, and we urge you, brethren, to recognize those who labor among you and are over you in the Lord and admonish you, and to esteem them very highly in love for the work's sake. Be at peace among yourselves. The nature of this work that he's talking about, connecting with the people, he wanted to make sure that he knew what was going on with people. That was, he specified. Now, one person can't get around and do that with the whole nation. So he made sure he had a means to do it. Why? Because you need to know what problems people are having in life. Why? Because it affects everyone. If you're in any organization, you got someone who's having problems that get bad enough, it ends up affecting everyone. It rubs off. It changes the mood. You know, what does it happen if you come and all it takes is one person that decides they're going to be Mr. Grouchy for the day? Hey, how are you doing? Oh, no. I'm not expecting you to lie. You don't have to say you're feeling great when you don't feel great. I want to know if you're having trouble, if you're hurting. But a lot of times, sometimes we don't realize the effect we can have on one another. And that, to me, that says you may need something. Why? Because it affects everyone. If one member suffers, all the members suffer with it. Or if one member is honored, all the members rejoice with it. 1 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 26. We need to know. We need to know the good things too, because that can be a positive influence. And we will when we're connected with one another. You also need to know their abilities, limitations, and motivations of people. And this is really important and helpful at getting us all together. It means, here's how you put people in the right place. In 1 Peter chapter 4, verse 10 and following, it says, as each has received a gift, minister it to one another as good stewards of the manifold grace of God. If anyone speaks, let him speak the oracles of God. If anyone ministers, let him do it with the ability which God supplies. The whole point is the role you fit to, and you have to know. There are certain things that certain people should be doing and certain things certain people should not be doing. You need to connect to people to know. You've got a problem to deal with. You got a plumbing issue. You call up, say, hey, Kevin, I got a plumbing issue. I'm saying, congratulations. You want me to hear about it? You can hear if you want to. We'll talk about all my plumbing issues. Not now, thankfully. But what I've had, yeah, we can talk about it. But I can't help you. You need to know that. Okay? We have different strengths, different abilities, different things we offered. The better a leader understands his people, the better he can put people in the right places so everything functions well. Everyone is happy doing the things they're very good at. And when that happens, the body functions really well. In the background, then, that puts a place where we can now learn and we can grow and we can learn new things so Kevin can learn about plumbing. You need to know what matters to people so that you can help them see why their contribution matters to you. The more you understand why things matter to them and what's important to them, you connect it in. let us consider one another. He begins with that. Consider one another to provoke one another to love and to good works. Not forsaking the assembling of ourselves together as the manner of some is, but exhorting one another, and so much the more as you see the day approaching. Hebrews chapter 10, verses 24 and 25. Enterprising leaders. Nehemiah took a group of men, focused them on a common cause, and built a team of leaders that changed the course of history. But we don't think of it that way. That's just in the Bible. Yeah, it mattered. Our familiarity with this account sometimes hurts our ability to appreciate it. And it hurts us in understanding why they were so successful. And therefore we can't learn from it. But as that Forbes article I mentioned demonstrates, the principles that they used were so solid, they're still recognized in the business world today. Actively participate in the work. Invest yourself. Pay attention to details. Guide the work along. Take the initiative. Connect with the people. These are things that are recognized as being effective in organizations of every kind. They work, and God knew that when he had a leader that was listening to him, Nehemiah. These principles of enterprising leadership extend far beyond business. They're about people. And in fact, no matter what business you may be in, you are in the people business, whether you realize it or not. In one way or another, you're dealing with people. And that certainly is true in the Lord's church. We exist to help people, to grow people, to strengthen people, and to save people. And goals that big require enterprising leaders. When Jesus came on the greatest mission of all time, he came to save men's souls. Leadership. Identifying with the people, being with the people, guiding the people, connecting with people, and in the end, dying for people. And in that process, he laid the groundwork by which then, when he rose from the dead, now he can offer hope to people in a way he never could have before. He sent the gospel message, reporting this and saying, you take that message out, apostles. Here's the power. Here's the power to bring people in to me and fulfill what was the plan all along, is creating this group of people that are heading to heaven. All because they're following the same message of the same book, the gospel, Romans 1, 16 and 17. But you have to trust it. You have to trust the messenger of God in Jesus, and you have to trust the message that he's provided in faith, Hebrews 11, verse 6. But that's going to require you to change. You can't keep doing things the same way that caused the failures in order to get success now. That means repent. You change your life to get the results of heaven because you're doing God's will. Acts 17, verse 30. So acknowledge Jesus for who he is, the one who came and did what we could not do for ourselves. God in the flesh died for men. And if we will acknowledge that, not just once, but for all time, Romans chapter 10, verses 9 and 10, and now you say, I'm committing, then be baptized for the remission of sins. That's where the commitment begins fully on. That's where you say, it's your life now, not mine. And we do things your way. Why? Because Jesus was a great leader. He is a great leader. He deserves to be followed. He deserves for you to follow him too. And if you're ready to do that, won't you please come while we stand and sing?